The movie is unstoppable. From page 3, the train's moving. And it just gets faster and faster and crazier and crazier. It's non-stop action.
It's coming straight at us.
My goal was to shoot everything as real as possible, and that in terms of my stunts and as little CG as possible. So therefore, I had real guys on top of real trains rather than CG trains or trying to or blue screen or green screen it.
Tony, he has a very specific dynamic that he really likes. It's very bold, strong imagery, and he has a very particular style of shooting that lends itself to this sort of high energy type of movie.
The train is the star of the movie. Chris Pine and myself, we're just sidemen for the train.
What I always love is that challenge of having a character-driven story in the midst of this beast, which looks like it's doing 100 miles an hour. So it was a great vehicle for me in terms of editing and getting pace and momentum. The whole movie is inspired by a real event, and so that's what I'm always looking for: real people, real events to inspire me creatively.
I was never really much of a train person. I sort of was interested in them as a little kid, like a lot of kids, but I was never a real rail fan or anything like that. And I quickly became fascinated, and I get why people love them. They just seem like an interesting setting for a film that, you know, there's been films obviously set in trains, but not in a while, and I thought this was a new way. It was almost so old school, it was new school. You had an antagonist that's unthinking, that that there really is no villain in the story other than this machine. And then my mind just started running with who those two guys could be.
I knew Mark Bomback and loved his work and approached him about it. And right away, within 3 sentences, he got it. He said, I know exactly what this world should feel like. And he brought a lot of shape to the characters. At first, people don't know what they're dealing with, and then it becomes more and more suspenseful. But what Mark Bomback and I did together was find ways to make the characters feel sort of another ordinary day in their life becomes extraordinary.
I had worked on the script for about 2 years on and off before Tony came on. It was the only time in my career, I'm sure it's still going to be the only time in my career, where when I gave the first draft to the studio, they said, we have no notes. We're just going to start trying to put this together. 2 years later, Tony got a hold of the script, and I was called by the studio, and they said, Tony really loves it. He has some thoughts about how to make the first act go a little quicker, but we don't think it's going to be a lot of work, And so we got on the phone, and he said, yeah, I think it's really good. I'm a little concerned that we should probably do some more research, but, I think the first act is, needs to be tightened. And from that point on, we never stopped working on the script. The entire script changed more. I have more drafts post-Tony in the 6 months that we worked together before shooting than the 2 years that preceded Tony.
First thing you do, you read the script, and I said, wow, this is one of the scripts that was the fastest read I've ever had, and I'm a really slow reader, bad reader. And I couldn't put it down, I just did that with it. And then I think what my first read, what you're now seeing on screen, is a direct reflection of that first read. That's what I felt about the movie. That was my vision of the movie then.
Oh, so you mean, so I couldn't see him? The problem is I couldn't see you. He really got my attention when I went to go visit him, and he's always prepared. And he got all these trains, he's met all the people, he's got all the goods. He'll just hook you, and nobody outworks him that I've worked with. And so he makes it real easy.
I meet the people, I see the world, I see the trains, I get a sense and a feel, and then with all my research, I then bring it back to my writer, to Mark, and say, this is what we, and I took Mark on that journey with me. I took Mark on my research trips with me. I took him on the journey to meet different guys, to see the world, see the train, stand on a track with a train coming past you, at 80 miles an hour.
He is obsessed with research. He gave me just a huge education on really how you research a film. While I'd done a lot of research, I would now look back at it and say it was sort of perfunctory, that you really have to get in there and spend weeks with these guys and see what it is that they do.
With Mark, we saw right from real life with real guys that we met. And it was the guy who Denzel's character felt the Chris character got the job because of nepotism, and he was a pretty boy, and Denzel was just being fired, and all that came from research. All that came from the real world, and Mark. Often writers don't like embracing research. Mark loved it.
You can be as creative and imaginative as you want, but you're only coming out of your own experience, which in my case is completely sheltered from what it means to be a guy who works on the railroad. So some of my favorite things in the script now came out of that research period with Tony.
He collects so much stuff. All I got to do is go through what he has, you know, books and photographs and interviews with people. And then that allows me to just take a big stack of stuff home. And then when I got here, whatever it was, 3-4 months ago, just getting behind the wheel of the trains and learning, you know, what they're all about. I mean, I can drive them now.
Before we started filming, me, Denzel, and Tony and Mark spent hours and hours and hours and hours talking about character and the arc of the characters and the arc of the story and how the different scenes fit into the very specific, you know, arc of these two men's journey. So I felt secure in the fact that we'd prepared for a long time before we got to set.
The locations are very specific to the story. As we're going along the journey, we're getting into much more heavily populated and industrial areas, so it was really critical to find all those things. And I think that was another really logistically challenging thing, was the sort of jigsaw puzzle of locations and doing pieces of the movie in all different places.
Typically what Tony does when he first starts filming is he puts images together. He originally started out wanting to look for the Montana look, kind of the great look with mountains and open plains.
When I did my homework at first, I started to pull together pictures and cut together footage from Montana and flat open spaces, but in the end, it felt like the wide open spaces didn't have the danger, and it didn't feel as right as shooting in Pennsylvania, which had those deep wooded valleys. And that time of year, wide open spaces would have been a little more surreal, but less dangerous.
Once we started investigating tracks, and Tony did some very early scouting earlier in the year, a lot of it from helicopter, and it all looked fantastic from the air, which is inevitable. But then we discovered that all the good track was all obviously working track, and all the track that we wanted to get speed out of was track that's used every day. And we were looking to basically shut track down for a month, and trying to find track that we could run at, you know, speeds of 40, 50 miles an hour. It's very, very difficult.
They told us where we could go, and Tony had to then get his vision from that, because there were so many variables when you're dealing with a railroad.
These train companies are not used to leasing to people like us and of course we work on such tight and short turnarounds. Getting all the lease agreements, getting all the lawyers together and getting all that done was just, they'd never done it so quickly. We were painting up until the night before we started shooting, so there was no rehearsal at all. Not only did we have the shooting schedule, there was a very tight rehearsal schedule, and the guys doing the driving of the trains, you know, they'd never done stuff like this before.
The number of people that you bring to an endeavor like this is absolutely amazing. I mean, the trucks and the people and the crews that come in here, everything is planned out like an army general. This is really a major logistical exercise for the movie people, as well as an artistic exercise. You're merging the two together, you know, logistics and art, and hopefully coming up with a film.
Clear, stand by to shoot, thank you.
Trains incoming, guys, trains incoming. Open, action.
I felt that the strength of the way I was shooting this movie was to shoot everything for real, which is a logistical nightmare, logistical headache, because I've got a train which is half a mile long and it's doing, 50 miles an hour.
For Tony, he's obviously done a lot of big scale action movies in different worlds, and I think he was really excited by this world, that this is something that he could uniquely approach and that we haven't seen trains in this situation before. I was really excited by the fact that he wanted to keep it very real and very based in reality. There's nothing in the movie that isn't either based on actual events or within the laws of physics and reality to happen.
What's interesting with Tony and working with Tony before is I know everything he wants to do is in camera. He wants to shoot everything practically, use as little CG as possible. So I think the challenge there was, you know, racing trains, a lot of action, a lot of stunts. You know, a lot of our prep time involved trying to figure out how to, you know, shoot stuff as much in camera as possible.
I looked at every derailment, I think in every movie that's ever been done, and none of them I was always disappointed. And the majority of ones I've been looking at had been CG or done in sections or against green screen. And I said, I don't want to do that. I want to do it. I want to do it for real. The way the sequence was actually built and designed. Joe Pancake and John, when you look at the sequence, it looks monumental, but it was so simplistic how they did it. And it was just logic. It's like a basketball hoop with a dick on the train. When that dick gets into the hoop, there's an explosive device that pulls the train over, and they cannoned, you know, one side of the train that pushed it over the way it was being pulled. But it was all a huge piece of choreography. I think the biggest piece of choreography I've ever done. I only had one shot at it, one take.
A basic shooting team consisted of 4 ground cameras, 2 helicopter-mounted cameras, at least 1 camera, often 2 on our Porsche Cayenne tracking vehicle.
It's a high-speed camera car with a gyro-stabilized remote control crane system on top and gyro-stabilized camera systems mounted to the car.
This is our portion crane from Pursuit Systems. We're running 2 cameras on it, 2 camera operators, 2 ACs, just to double up on the footage.
Makes it a little crowded inside, so we have 6 people actually inside the little car.
Roll, ready to gain, ready, and go, Mikey, go. Arm down.
You got this crane arm with this camera on the end of it, and I've got an insane driver who's, you know, wannabe NASCAR driver, I think. And I've got all the boys. I've got Brooks, who's there as my operator on the wheels.
This is the first movie where every day is tracking. I mean, it's a train driving. I mean, the whole movie's about the train moving. So there's an awful lot of tracking shots in this.
A typical day with Tony starts in the morning at a little table, and he has little Matchbox toys that he actually places down. He has helicopters and cop cars and little trucks. And every morning we go through the storyboards with the lines, the dialogue that he needs, and he methodically goes through every shot and every setup.
Camera left for you for the start here, okay. And you should come down here, stay off camera left.
What it did for me, I've got a camera car running alongside the train. I've got 3 or 4 cameras, but there's no movement from those cameras other than long lenses or in and out the zoom. Whereas the ultimate arm of the Porsche gets that arm can get with a 30-foot extension, can get in places where it could never get with a wide lens, or it'll boom up or it'll crane down.
We can run up to a mile away, half a mile away, and be going 100 miles an hour, and you have all these trees going in front of the image, the camera, and it just helps with that sense of speed and peril.
We had all the toys. We had helicopters, which are fantastic. These guys, when you see it, they'll say they're going to be CG helicopters. They're real.
Tony loves his toys. Tony loves helicopters. He loves helicopters so much that if you say the word helicopter, he either starts smiling or he starts jumping up and down in place.
I think we got that one. I think we got that one, yes. So now it's helicopter.
Say this was the right film to shoot from a helicopter because you have a piece of machinery that's traveling vast distances very hard. And with static cameras or even moving cameras on tracking vehicles, you just don't have the scale of movement that you can get from a helicopter.
The first one is the high rail, yeah.
We've been on this show for 10 weeks, which is very unusual to be on a show doing nothing but aerials for that length of time. And then to have 2 helicopters that are going every single day as both story ships and camera ships, I don't think it's ever really been done before.
Right from the point that the train got away, I said, let's have a news helicopter down and in there. Let's have a helicopter which is a spotter helicopter, and then a second news helicopter comes in. So it's 3 3 helicopters in all, and they did this ballet and this choreography, and I can hear them all talking, talking to each other from on my ground-to-air radios, and I'm trying to communicate to them what I'm after.
On this setup, he's going to get close. He's not going to slam and bang.
Dave Knoll and Alan Perwin and Fred North are just, I mean, these guys are like on another level in terms of helicopter stuff.
The helicopters they're my guys, you know. They've been with me a long time, and those guys, they put helicopters in places that no normal human beings can, but I always feel they're safe. I always feel they've got something in reserve.
One of the parameters and the thing we have the ability with these particular camera systems is the stability of the Cineflex itself, and we're using extremely long lenses. These are 42:1 zoom lenses, so in film speak, it's about a 24 millimeter to start with, so fairly wide, but I can go all the way into a little over 1,000 millimeter using the same lens, and that makes everything rush by quicker. The background rush is quicker, the foreground rush is quicker. With the lens that I can get tight enough that you can see it's the real actors, and that's part of what Tony's having us do, that we can get down there, and they have Denzel on top of the train, and he's harnessed and he's got cables, everything is safe for him, but besides the coverage that they're getting looking up from the ground, we can get stuff where we're right next to him because we're the only ones that can get at that level.
That helicopter guy was crazy, but he was like doing a slalom between trees, following us. I mean, he was literally going between trees and up and down and all around.
Here the guys were, Alan and Fred, they're ducking and diving and coming in. They were, I can't tell you how close they got. Sometimes the skids are a foot away, often when they shut down, there'd be greens hanging off the skids or off the rotor blades, but those aerials were absolutely amazing.
It was a massive contribution to the movie, what they could do from the air. In a way for me, what they did was three-dimensional camera work, where often we were restricted to 1 or 2-dimensional work. And it's the best way to see it. They could work in a volume of space around the train where we could only work in a sort of linear way with the train. And so, we had them with us the whole movie, and it was absolutely the right decision.
This is a Tony Scott film. He's a kinetic filmmaker. His movies always have movement. He loves shooting these 360 shots. So in the cab, we had this buck made where it was wide enough on the front where you could have a camera just go around and around and around.
We shot a lot of the dialogue scenes from it, but it allowed us to film 360 degrees around the actors while they were driving, and the buck was engineless, so it was towed or pulled.
Tony's visual style fits perfectly with a movie like this. It's all about building tension through, the movement and the placement of the camera.
One of the interesting things about doing a film like this for real is that you're hanging off the train, whether you're strapped on by a piece of rope or standing on top of the train doing 60 miles an hour going under a tunnel with mounts on top, underneath. We were strapped onto this thing in one form or another the whole way through the movie.
What I really enjoyed is that he loves to shoot a lot of cameras at once, and what that allows the actor to do is play the scene, and you don't have to stop and then get coverage. You do occasionally, but for the most part, you let the scene play out. There's one camera that's on a wide, one's punched in, and one will start punched in and go out. And it's a testament, too, to his incredible camera department that, we have some of the best focus pullers in the business and operators, and it's just, it only works because we have these great guys.
Everybody knows the process, knows what I'm looking for, knows the goals I'm trying to achieve, and a lot of those guys have been with me 20 plus years, and it's a great shorthand. I love input because all my guys are the best at what they do, and whatever input they give to only make this movie better.
Okay, good. Yeah. So now hold on, pan.
You all right? It's the hardest film that I've ever done. You have scenes that are itty bitty scenes, but they're linked together. They happen right after one another, and you shoot a film over 4 months or so, and to get a sense of continuity, to build continuity of character, to build a character when so much of the film is action-based, is extremely difficult.
Connie? Just let him know we're going to be coming in real hot.
There's a rule of thumb. As you get deeper into the movie, the shots on the train become more dynamic. I mean, I use helicopter as a counter track, for instance, coming to the curve at the end. other boys who are counter-tracking the train, so it looks like the train's doing 150 miles an hour coming head on at you, you know. So I paced myself and saved myself in terms of the momentum and the danger and the energy of that train. You know, it felt like it was growing in speed.
Watching how Tony is shooting this has been really remarkable. Sometimes you look at these scenes and it seems kind of small, like, okay, you're going here, highlight this, you know, it seems kind of small, little inane, like expositional sort of just letting everybody know what world we're in kind of stuff, but the way that he's shooting it just builds all of this energy.
It was seamless. I could cut from one tracking shot on the train or one long lens on the train to another tracking shot of Rosario, and normally what I'd do, I'd count and say, so we did the sequence on the train going right to left, I'll do Rosario left to right.
It really builds up, like you start getting out of your seat, and I call that like that sort of stunt acting where it's like it cuts to me and you know they're jumping on trains and they're doing all this other stuff and I'm just sitting in a room on a phone, but like how do you make that work? So you just go, oh, you got my pulse 57 yet? You know, you gotta like, I gotta be out of breath even though I'm not doing anything.
Frank 777 just passed milepost 58.
It's really important to have that guy in the seat who's directing this and going, okay, how am I gonna blend these performances together so that people will believe that we are in this together at the exact same time.
1206, you there?
1206, over.
Frank, you're right.
But you know what I do when I shoot movies? I create paint that goes on my palette, then goes on my canvas, which is in the editing room with my editors, yeah. When you think about it, you've got this great story unfolding between these two guys, and then you've got this cross-cut with this insane piece of 100,000 tons of steel that feels like 150 miles an hour, cross-cut with Rosario, who's trying to figure out what's going on, where and when. It gives me a great opportunity to mix and match the quiet and the insanity and the performance and not knowing.
Is the company planning on derailing 777? Last I heard, Galvin was dead set against it.
Good. You got one more and you're good. Excellent.
We call the train the Beast. The Beast is the third character in the movie. And the Beast gets away and it's on the loose.
It's like a high-rise office building moving at 40 or 50 miles an hour through the country.
In terms of the use of my sound, I gave that energy and that danger because I made this the Beast. It had a voice of its own and we stole from animal sounds as well as production sounds.
The 777, it has a great quality of the ultimate movie villain. It defies every system that's put into place to stop it. It seems to have a mind of its own.
The train is the third main character and should get top billing in the film.
Everything on the train hurts. Heavy steel, there's nothing soft on it. Everything can crush you. Everything. Crush your feet between cars if you're not careful.
It's a hard, rough, tough environment. Even walking, I have a difficult time walking on the ballast. It's very uneven. It's hard to get your footing.
Normally when you do these kind of things with a train, you probably maybe have one or two trains and a couple of background trains. But we ended up having to lease, I think it was something like 11 trains. We were leasing 4 777s and then we had 4 1206s. Then we had a consist of 25 cars for the 777 plus all the doubles. So essentially we had our own railroad.
The locomotives that we're working with, what we call the Hero train, which is a 1206, is an SD40 locomotive. The locomotives that we are using for the runaway train, they're called AC 4400s. They're a large road locomotive, and they're AC powered as opposed to DC powered like these are.
Doing all the various different jobs, we ended up having to make them so we can blind drive them with the 1206s. We ended up with one that we called the Buck, which basically we bought a scrapped SD40s. Took the engines out, took all the fuel, everything out of it, cleaned it right out, and then where the engine was, we made a production center in the back of the train, and then made that the cab was all wild so we could get in and around it, adding decks all around it for camera, for lighting, and all that kind of stuff. Then we then had another one, an exact copy of that, which drove itself, but then had the ability to be able to drive it with a remote unit so that the driver could be either on the train or off the train. When he was on the train, we then had to make a position for him in the nose that he could see out, but we couldn't see him.
106 in the Buckout. My job primarily is operating the locomotives with a remote control. The remote control box is what I use to control the train with. It has all the features that a regular control center has for the locomotive engineer. One of the challenges with this job working with the movie is being able to attain a maximum speed for the film and then hold that constant speed so that the stunt people and the actors can get on and off the moving equipment as safely as possible.
We turned over the railroad to the movie people between 0800 and 2000 hours during the day, which means that our own operations are now conducted in the overnight hours. The movie crew has essentially total possession of the line during daylight hours. Movie trains are operated under our authority. We are still a railroad, and legally we're responsible. So the trains that run have our crews along with the movie crews, and all of the movement orders and the dispatching is done by the railroad.
At the end of each day, we'd have a meeting and kind of discuss what we're starting with, what was the important elements, what we needed from the trains, where the trains were going to be, because we were shooting over miles and miles of track.
I think the biggest lockup was 10 miles of railroad track, yeah. But in that 10 miles, I'd say there must be 20 crossings, from private houses or actual street crossings. So we had to be really careful that the general public, somebody wasn't coming out of their own driveway and going across, not paying attention.
Not very many train films are made in the way that Tony makes a film, and he wanted to do so much of it practically. And there's a lot of sequences where we needed to get trains on the same track close together. So we ended up having to make or devise ways of getting parts of trains onto, like set pieces, onto the track that we could control. So we ended up making bits of 1206s and bits of 777s being pushed by these big high rail vehicles.
And cut! Good. That's nice.
How many guys coming ladies and gentlemen, Chris Pine's last day. Last shot, ladies and gentlemen. And mine too, but young lad.
Fifth movie done.
That's right, our fifth movie together. That's it.
So Frank and Will are done!
This movie has got pace, momentum, and fear. It's what I call an edge-of-the-seat movie, much more than I've ever done in my life.
These guys have been out there shooting this train from every angle imaginable and possible. Helicopters swooping down and really sort of pushing the limits of what could and should be done.
This was the toughest movie, both creatively and physically. Logistically, it was hard trying to schedule this train to run so I could actually get coverage on my boys.
Doing things for real creates a raw energy that's fantastic.
When you put actors in a real situation, it's so much easier for them to feel and touch and access who they are and the situation, because everything was surreal.